G'day folks, my name's Michael O'Reilly, Chairman of the Australian Cotton Chippers Association. I'm here today with my little mate Sprocket, and we welcome you to our webinar. The rains have come. The crop is 4 times bigger than last season. We're 2 months from harvest and we're expecting great quality. We know you'll be travelling soon, so come down under and visit Little Sprocket.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this, our first live AXA online seminar. We are 3 weeks late due to a COVID lockdown, but that's given us an opportunity to see what's happening with the recent rain that we've received throughout the cotton growing areas in Australia. We're delighted to have so many people attend and to hear what we're going to discuss about the Australian cotton industry. My name is Emma McDonough and I'll be your host for this event. We have a lot of information to bring to you today. The format of our seminar is more interview and panel session rather than presentation. We do welcome your questions, so please use the Q&A box or the chat box to ask your questions. We'll hold them over to the end of the session where we'll open them up to the panel to answer. We will also have 2 polls that will appear just before the Q&A session. Today we want to talk about the progress for the current crop, the market movement for both futures and basis, and what's new in innovation. What does the future for Australian cotton look like? Let me introduce the AXA members here with us today. We have our chairman, Michael O'Reilly from Olam. We have Arthur Spelson, previously of Auscot and now with ADM. And Cliff White from Omnicotton and Matt Brad from Ecom. Thank you for joining me today, gentlemen.
Thanks, Emma.
Starting with the most important topic, that is the crop that's now being harvested. We're going to speak with Arthur about its progress so far. Welcome, Arthur, and thanks for joining today. Before we get into the discussion, let's hear from some of the growers on how their crop is progressing.
Yes, I'm a third generation farmer here in the southeast Queensland, around the Dalby area. We're a family farming operation. I've worked with 2 brothers and my parents, farming over 10,000 hectares of dryland and irrigated land. Our main crop is cotton. Happy this year because the season has totally changed. Last year was probably our worst. This year is looking a lot more promising and quite good. There's still a little bit of a build-up to recover from those dry periods, but next year's looking good. There's some water getting in storages, water flowing around and allocations increasing. There's a whole different change in the weather. There's more moisture around. We've just had some rain in the past few days again, and a lot of these crops have been growing on rainfall, so a lot less reliant on irrigation. But they're looking good, and we're really excited about what the end result will be.
Yep, so I'm Rod Gordon. I work for Hancock Farmland Services Australia. The farm that we're on is Brooklyn Farms Australia. It's basically, as the crow flies, it's an 18,000 hectare aggregation. 14,000 hectares is cropped. We've got just under 900 hectares across the whole aggregation, and on Moban to Dilla here there's 590 hectares, and we've got about 5,000 hectares developed for irrigation. We've only got 900 hectares in. You could say we're probably 2,500 hectares to 3,000 hectares would be a full production year for us. Oh look, we've had a fairly reasonable season here. We planted on time just at the end of October. In the fully irrigated crop, I'd expect around 12.5 bales to the hectare. With a good finish, I'd hope that those yields will be slightly better than that, but there's great fruiting positions. We just need some good sunny weather and a solid warm finish, and we'll bring this crop home. It's looking good. End of April, early May is probably what we're tracking for picking.
At the time of filming these videos, the crop looked great. It was still at flowering stage, and as Rod Gordon mentioned there, he was hoping for some good fine weather to finish the crop off. I did speak with both of those growers in the last 2 days, and they advised that they were very happy with the rain that they've received. It hasn't had a detrimental effect to the crop. They expect to defoliate in the next few weeks with harvest in early to mid-May. So Arthur, are we seeing any negative impact to the recent rain on the crop?
Oh, there were a few isolated areas, Emma, which probably received a little bit more rain than what they would have liked. But in general, most farmers were able to get the water off their cotton in a reasonable amount of time in order to minimise damage. There's been a bit of talk of a bit of boll rot, but that might have a minor effect on yield, but we'll never really know how much effect it's had. I think on balance, most farmers will say that the rain was very beneficial. It was what they've been waiting for, certainly for the coming crop. Yeah.
So maybe slight effect to yield, but nothing major at this stage. And we've also seen a little bit of quality class, but still very little at this stage. How's it looking?
So it's very early days. The crop, most of the crop was not defoliated. There was only a really small portion of the crop that was defoliated when those heavy rains came a few weeks ago. So we were lucky in that regard, and the farmers were lucky that the crop wasn't so exposed. The few crops that were defoliated, some of them have started to be picked, and the early indications are that quality hasn't been affected too badly. So we're in pretty good shape, I think. Yep.
Good news. So we've recovered somewhat from last year's crop, which was the smallest in over 30 years, with only 670,000 bales or 150,000 tonnes. And we hear from the growers that they're able to increase their planting for this season. So how big do you think this crop is going to be? Yeah,
so most of the estimates at the moment are around the 2.5 million bale mark. So we're about 4 times what the crop was last year, so it's good improvement. We see historically it generally takes us a couple of years to come out of a serious drought event like we had last year. So we're on the right track, and so depending on how yields end up, 2.5 million bales, maybe a little bit more.
And obviously this recent rain has added some great positivity for the future crops to come. Maybe hopefully 2 to 3 years potentially we'll get some decent sized crops again. Yep. We know that water is the single biggest limiting factor to growing cotton in Australia, but what are the other challenges that growers are facing these days?
Yeah, so I guess on a broader scale, we are facing a similar challenge to what they've had in California, I'd say, over the past decade, where the value of water really does drive what crops farmers grow. There has been a little bit of a shift to permanent tree crops in some areas where the water is a little bit more reliable, and that's just a factor of economics, and that will happen from time to time. I think on a more broad scale, one of the challenges that we're going to face is around labour as we come back into bigger crops, and we've had that before when we've come out of droughts in the past. I guess it is being magnified a bit by the COVID situation and the pandemic. I remember back when we came out of the last drought, we had ginners and other skilled people coming in from other countries, South Africa and all sorts of places. That sort of thing's going to be a bit more difficult. We do rely somewhat on seasonal labour for some roles, and the fruit industry's just gone through some challenges with their harvest, not having seasonal labour. So, yeah, that's something that's going to confront us as our crop gets bigger again next year.
Yeah, true, but I suppose hopefully we have a little bit of a lead time, and hopefully COVID vaccine rollouts help and we're able to get more people moving around, even the odd backpacker too, Arthur, we could get back again. We are also, in Australia, ideally positioned as a just-in-time deliverer to particularly the Asian markets, but as we've seen in the last probably 6 to 12 months, there has been really global congestion in the supply chains. Do you have any comment about any negative issues we could face moving the crop to market this year? Yeah,
I think it really has been a global crisis in the shipping industry. The level of congestion and delays that shipments have been facing. From an Australian perspective, it's been grain. We know from other cotton growths, the US crop and the Brazilian crop have faced delays. And this is all prior to a ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal. It's not just due to that one isolated incident. The rebound in economic activity and the amount of retail activity, a lot of goods moving around the globe. So Australia is not immune to that, but what we're expecting and hoping is that once we get to peak cotton shipping towards the back end of the second quarter, and as we move into the third quarter, that this situation will have eased somewhat. We're coming out or down from the end of our peak grain exporting season, and also we're 40-foot containers, grains 20-foot, but we still compete for dead weight and allocation on ships. But that peak's ending, and we're also hearing that shipping lines are starting to allocate a bit more capacity on the routes that we depend upon. So, yeah, we're hopeful that the situation will have eased and we'll be able to ship our crop as efficiently and in a timely manner like we normally do, and our customers have come to expect from us.
Yeah, certainly it would be great to see some of that congestion ease as we come into the peak months of the June, July, August period. Just looking at what we've seen in the rain events over the last few weeks, and we have seen rain in all cotton growing areas, and it's been to the large part very beneficial. Looking at a chart that we've got now that shows the 12-month year-on-year change from the major cotton water storage dams in the regional areas from April 2020 to April 21, we can see that it's added substantial rain. But Arthur, how do we see this translating into the crop for next year?
Yeah, so these 4 dams that are listed up here, they basically represent the 4 major storage dams in what we would refer to as the Central Valleys, so basically from the Queensland border down to central New South Wales. And they're the 4 growing areas that have really missed out in the last 2 years, and it's hard for us here to grow really big crops when we have those 4 big growing areas missing out. So it's great to see that there's been a marked improvement in the big government storages, as are listed here, to sort of 50 to 60%. But it should be noted that in those areas, on those river systems, most of the on-farm storages are more like 100%. So those 4 main growing areas, or large growing areas, are in much better shape than they were this time last year and the year before. And once we put that in with the other areas that are not listed, we're hopefully looking at something in the vicinity of 4 million bales for the 2022 crop. And yeah, hopefully we see some more rains over winter, and you never know, we might end up with 1 million tonnes. We'll see.
Well, we can only hope and pray for that rain to continue to come. But also we have farmers are actually, they've managed to fill on-farm storages, and rivers are running too, which is wonderful for the environment and for everyone concerned. Thanks, Arthur. I think we'll turn our attention now to the roller coaster ride that has been the market of late. And welcome to Cliff and Matt, who are going to share their insights on the market movements. Let's have a look at where the current futures charts sit. Cliff, you've been trading cotton for a long time. What's your view of the constant volatility and the current market level, and do you think it's sustainable?
First of all, thanks for the kind introduction, Emma. I'm glad you didn't say how long. But, yeah, it's been a remarkable period on the futures market, and indeed the whole cotton market. Who would have believed, after the start we had 12 months ago with the pandemic, when there was so much confusion, trepidation, concern about what would happen with markets in general, and cotton was no exception. So our futures market drop below 50 cents. And I think most of us would agree that at that time we were all searching for answers. How would this play out? What would it do to demand? And obviously the initial impression was that it would kill demand. It didn't take very long for that realization to be incorrect, and we started to see a steady increase in demand. And because of what was going on globally, we saw a lot more volatility with that. As things looked more positive, obviously we benefited from that. Flip side is, when people felt negative, it was a poor move in the market because of that. Mm-hmm. So it increased the volatility. And I think we've also got to remember that the movements in the markets today, not just cotton, the movements are magnified by the movement of global funds. And when people talk about macro influences, whether it's risk on or risk off, therefore we see more movement in the market. But generally, I think the supply and demand situation has undoubtedly tightened over this last 6 months. Combination of reasons for that, smaller production in certain countries. But I think probably the big driver has been the fact that at the start of the pandemic, the spinners ran down their stocks simply because they were unsure about what was going to happen with the market. And as everyone got more comfortable, the demand started to return. And what we have seen is a market that's moved nearly 50 cents from its low at the start of this pandemic back up to the mid-90s. Mm. And while we've come off that level in the last few weeks, we're still at a relatively high level in the ice futures market. But it appears supported by good demand.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Bloomberg recently estimated that US consumers now have a 1.5 trillion in extra saving due to the inability to spend or various lockdowns during COVID. But globally, this figure is close to 2.9 trillion. So the growth in savings levels is the highest in consumer markets of the US, the European Union, Japan, and China. So though we're saving money, it also seems like we're spending money. If the unprecedented congestion in the global supply chain is anything to go by. Matt, do you see that this is a sign that retailers are restocking and that demand for textiles is strong, and also that's driving the futures?
Thanks, Emma. Yes, definitely demand for retail and clothing accessories is strong. Online demand's been particularly strong. We had some statistics out of the US last week just saying that US sales for clothing and accessories were at $22.9 billion, which was up 18% month on month, and I believe 100% year on year, which means the spending's increased 100%. Clearly that's increasing the demand in the cotton futures price.
Just as an aside to that, it's probably worth noting that women are responsible for most of that consumer spending, so we should thank women's spending for supporting the market. Let's take a look at the global trade situation. Strong export trade numbers of almost 45 million bales, with the major exporters of US, Brazil and India, and no surprise that China, the largest importer. Cliff, given the global environment and that we didn't expect to see this trade flow as strong, do you think that this level of production and consumption will continue?
Production might be a question mark, but certainly it's extremely encouraging to see export trade now getting up to around 45 million bales a year. And I think, as you can see from the detail there will be significant opportunity for Australian cotton. It's been a number of years since we've produced a big crop. Now that we've got a reasonable crop this year and a larger crop next year, I think the fact that we're seeing export trade grow means that there's going to be more opportunity. And there are some big markets there as the major importers that certainly Australian cotton can target, and that there is going to be a lot of opportunity for us in the next 2 crop years.
Yes, agreed. And we have very clearly been dependent on the China market as a major market for our cotton for several years. Unfortunately, the current soft ban is making it difficult for Australian products into China, and hopefully that won't take too long to be resolved. But what do you see as the path for our exports in coming years?
Well, I think it goes back to the comments that I just made before on the potential other markets for Australian cotton. For the sustainability of our industry, we need to diversify the markets that we're going to. being reliant on one particular market, as you can see there, for a number of years, really isn't sustainable for the industry going forward. So the diversification of markets is crucial to the development of our industry, and we need to re-establish ourselves in previously established markets, but also expand some of those destinations that were listed on the previous slide into new markets or larger markets for Australian cotton. So diversity really is the key.
There's certainly one way that we can address that and make ourselves more attractive, and that's price. Matt, what comments do you have to make on the quite dramatic movement south in the Australian bases of late?
Thanks, Emma. Well, we're here to tell the spinners that are listening today that we've been to all those markets, Turkey, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, in the last few years. We want to remind you that Australia is growth that the spinners enjoy using. It's a complete package and it offers good value. So this chart here that you can see, it represents the basis value over the last 10 years from up to 2,500 on, and over the last 10 years, particularly in the last 2 years as the crops got smaller, we've come down to around 1,100-1,200 on. So that's one thing, but also the values have decreased versus the US and Brazil, so the basis differentials are quite competitive. And I've personally seen Australian trade under US basis levels, and that's something I'd like the spinning mills listening to really listen, that you're getting a superior product at a very competitive price. So with the crop getting bigger next year and the dams looking full, I think it's something to consider to put into your laydowns. And I think we're going to be competitive on the price.
I think this is, one of the real key point for us to be able to diversify markets is the attractiveness of our price. We know we've got the product. We know that provided we're there on price, that the spinners will pay significant attention to Australian cotton. So this is going to drive our target of diversifying markets. We are competitive now, and people are seeing that in the international market, and we're going to do it through price.
Well, let's look at the value proposition outside of price for spinners today, and we're going to just open to the panel where we'll have Michael join us and Arthur for this whole discussion. We're going to discuss the factors that set Australian cotton apart from its competitors. And I think we need to start with the remarkable story that is the cotton seed breeding story in Australia. Our industry has an excellent reputation for developing seed varieties that meet the demands of the growers, but also the spinning mills. This part of our industry is managed by the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Science Information Research Organisation. And we spoke with Dr. Warwick Stiller, who has been a member of this cotton seed breeding program since 1995 and became the lead scientist in 2012. Warwick recently discussed the signals that he receives that influence the research his team undertakes. Let's have a look.
So I started in the industry here 25 years ago, and really looking at doing things differently in the breeding program. First, we have to think about who our customer is. So I guess domestically from the growers, their main goal is to obviously is to have maximum profitability. Length and strength have certainly over the last 20 years have been a key driver in the fibre quality that we're aiming for. And really, I think that a lot of certainly from a discount point of view that growers get, a lot of that has been overcome. However, we do have, I guess, goals of continuing to make incremental improvements in both of those areas. But I guess one of the things to point out, at least from an Australian grower point of view, we're not making those gains at the compromise of yield. We're doing it concurrently with at least maintaining or even improving yield. So certainly we've been able to develop varieties that have high yield potential, but the systems that they're grown in have to be able to realise that yield potential. And I think that's why there's been a greater or more rapid increase over the last 10 years as growers have uptaken more and different technology to allow them to manage the crop better as well. Technology for insect control, for weed control that is inbuilt in the varieties now, as well as the other technology for managing the crops, absolutely has allowed that expansion in those non-traditional areas. So we're looking for resilience, we're looking for improved yield under potentially hotter environments with less water availability, and I think there is a range of things that we can do around that. Look, I think the varieties and the resilience of the varieties under the systems that we've got, and we already have reduced water availability and things. Look, the resilience has continued to improve, and hopefully we can maintain at least the current rate of improvement as I can drive around the industry and know that every plant that is growing out there was developed in our program here, and I was there at the start, the middle and the end of that. I get the best job in the world. I guess they can be assured that it is going to be produced in the most sustainable and environmentally friendly way that is probably possible anywhere around the world. It's going to be a consistent product and you're going to get the best value out of it.
Dr. Stiller and his team have provided new varieties suitable for growing in all production areas with higher yields, better fibre characteristics and better disease-resistant properties. Arthur, how important is this seed breeding program to our industry?
It's of utmost importance, Emma. The seed breeding program has really underpinned our industry. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be the industry that we are today if it wasn't for the efforts of our seed breeders. The yield, the quality, disease resistance, but I guess also from an environmental perspective, they not only give us these great characteristics, they also put in GM traits that help us have less of an environmental impact. Yeah, it's an enormous part of our industry and something that we need to really support and foster. It's put us where we are today.
Certainly allows us to expand into lots of regions that we couldn't have 10 years ago. Michael, several years ago we travelled to markets and we talked about, our aspirational targets of longer and stronger fibre when we had a campaign for 40-40-40. Did we achieve that?
Yes, no, we didn't achieve the 40-40-40, but what 40-40-40 is 40 length, 4.0 mic and 40 strength. So we have got 40 length when we have got 4.0 mic. So 2 out of the 3, yes. But what we have achieved is that it is getting longer, it is getting stronger. We're able to provide the market with lengths from 37 all the way through to 40. Our average length is currently at 38 and it has been for some time. Our strength is around, the average is around in the 31 GPT range. And which is great because we need the higher strength to complement those the long staple cotton that's getting produced.
So I suppose it was an aspirational target, but at the same time we're able to produce the varieties and produce the quality that's needed for a 30, 40, 50, 60 and even a higher count yarn, depending on the spinner and their requirements. So we have advanced in that space, but we haven't solely focused on just that top end.
No, we haven't. But as you rightly pointed out, we can supply cotton for the 30 to 40 counts, and 50s and 60s as well.
I think we were talking earlier today about the difference in the price between a Pima and ELS versus a 40 staple piece of Australian cotton, and there's a good value proposition there, Arthur.
Yeah, certainly.
Dr. Stiller mentions farm systems and resilience. What does he mean by that?
I'll take that if you like. So I think by resilience, what Dr. Stiller's referring to is the ability for our varieties and our cotton basically to perform in different conditions. So farming has challenges every year. There's challenges thrown at our crop, whether it be extreme heat or heavy rains like a few weeks ago. Every season is different, and we need to be able to adjust and grow a good crop, a high yielding and a high quality crop, no matter what those conditions are. And I think that's the resilience that Dr. Still is talking about. And I think that extends also to our farmers. Our farmers, they're given great seeds to start with, but if it's not for their skill and their ability to manage those seeds and those crops during challenging environmental conditions, that's what makes the difference, and that's the sort of resilience that Dr. Still is referring to.
Thanks, Arthur. As we look to the future for the Australian cotton industry, we have to consider the issues that have influenced our industry to date. We began benchmarking the environmental performance of our cotton industry in 1992. Research is a key factor in the ongoing success of the Australian cotton industry. The Cotton Research and Development Corporation, or the CRDC, is the main investor in research projects that benefit our industry. Alan Williams talked to us about the work of CRDC in a recent interview. Let's hear what he has to say.
I'm General Manager for R&D Investment at the Cotton Research and Development Corporation, based here in Nowra. Prior to that, I grew up on a cotton farm, so I've been involved in cotton in one way or another pretty much from the day I was born. We've done some really amazing things, I think, as an industry in the amount of cotton we've been able to produce per megalitre of water. So 1998, we were producing about 0.7 of a bale for every megalitre of water being applied to a crop or used by a crop, and now it's 1.25 bales for every megalitre of water. The other thing, of course, is that the yield is also going up per hectare, which is great news, and it's gone from something like 7 bales to nearly 11 bales in that same period of time as well. Certainly, one of the exciting things we've been supporting, and which is now in commercial use, is something called canopy temperature sensors, which allows the farm manager to understand exactly how the crop's going regarding its water use, allows them to really make sure that they're applying the water at just the right time so the crop doesn't get stressed, which then helps both increase the yield and improve water use efficiency, because you're putting the right amount of water on at the right time. We're also investing in automating irrigation systems, again just taking some of the labour out of the irrigation, which means again more efficient, saving water that way as well. But probably the bigger opportunity is the expansion into the north of the country, into the tropical north, and we've been supporting research in a number of locations in Western Australia, the Northern Territory and far North Queensland. As you know, the industry has sustainability reports it produces every 5 years, and we're very active in supporting both the collection of information around things like well-being, community resilience, and we have research to work out the best way of measuring that. And we're also obviously interested in what can we do to improve those sorts of things. One of the things we try and do is keep an understanding of what's going on in the broader market with, say, retailers and brands. And as you probably know, there's a lot of pressure being applied by retailers and brands down their supply chain. So we involve ourselves in, initiatives that are underway in Europe in particular, who want to label products. I think there's two answers to that question. The one is that, as our track record shows, we are committed to improving both the production practices and the environmental impact of cotton growing on the environment here, and we have the information to show that we've improved our yield, improved our water use efficiency, improved our pesticide use, all those things. We have a good track record, and we're committed to continuing to reporting on how we're going with that. So that is a commitment by the industry. I think the other thing too is that the foundations of the industry are on research. The growers voluntarily decided very early on, when the industry started in the 1960s, in the big way in the industry, to contribute to research. And so the progress of the industry has always been founded on a commitment by the growers to fund research, and by access to some fantastic researchers that just keep improving the way cotton is grown in Australia.
Well, it's great information and it's great factual data for us to build on. In just over 20 years, we have improved our production statistics dramatically from 0.7 bales per megalitre of water to over 1.25 bales per megalitre, and yields up from 7 to 11 bales per hectare in that same time period. But I do think that most growers today would be unhappy if they only got 12 bales per hectare. We hear them talk about farming water, which is the not growing cotton per se, but it's the highest return for investment for their water costs. Cliff, how does our yield stack up compared to other growths?
Extremely well. Australia is the leader in yield. And I think, just going back on your comment there of 7 to 11 bales, I think some of the early yields that we've already seen for this season is more like 15 to 16 bales per hectare. So there's no doubt that Australia leads the world in yield, and it's an amazing achievement that the industry has done over those 20 years, and we continue to improve, and who knows where we can be in the next 20 years. With the work that goes on, I think yield is always king, and it's going to remain that way here.
Yeah, that's for sure. Our cotton industry is very integrated. We have the CRDC managing the research funding. We have CSIRO managing the seed breeding. Cotton Australia represents growers, AXA represents merchants, and we have one seed producer, CSD, in Australia. The research is largely industry funded and self-funded, but there is some government funding. Cliff, how does this funding work?
Well, I think first and foremost, the industry that we have is a small industry and is very intertwined. As Alan mentioned in his comments, the growers recognised at the outset the importance of research and came to the conclusion that the way to do that was through contributing funding to research. That's combined with funding from the Australian government, and in fact, that's the only funding that the Australian government puts into the cotton industry. So they match the growers' contribution for research. I think it's also important to just clarify that even a bit further, that the Australian cotton industry receives no other government subsidies other than that research contribution, matched on a bale by bale. And yeah, research is the key to our industry, as a number of comments have been made. The way that we can keep moving forward, keep ahead of our competition, is through research. And some great work has been done over the years, there's no question.
Absolutely, it does underpin our industry's development. Alan touched on CRDC keeping an eye on what retailers are demanding, particularly in the labelling of products. And as we know, more and more in agriculture, as with other industries, there's a serious pressure to conform to social licence to operate. Companies are being rated on their environmental credentials, and this can affect even the investment or the financing of those businesses. Arthur, how do we measure our performance in this regard?
Yeah, so just to reiterate there, I agree with you, Emma, that consumers more and more in today's world want to know where their food and fibre came from, how it was produced, and the impact that production has on the natural environment. We're very lucky within our industry that people 20 years ago had the foresight to carry out an environmental audit in looking at the impact that our industry did have on the environment, and from that was born our BMP program, our Best Management Practices program. So we had that as a benchmark or a baseline, and since then, every 5 years, as I believe Alan mentioned, we do another environmental audit or another sustainability audit. So that enables us to track, okay, this is how we were going, this is where we are now. So we've got that data, and we can look at that data and make sure we're continually improving and managing our impact on the environment and do a better job every year.
And that BMP program, or Best Management Practice program, also it runs through the supply chain. So we have BMP at the classing houses, we have BMP at the warehouses and the gins. So it's very much a whole of industry approach to BMP. Matt, BMP also allows us to feed into other marketing strategies such as BCI. How's that working with Australian Cotton?
My BMP program has been around in Australia for a long time, and I believe around 75% of growers are at least level 1. That allows them to participate in level 2, which will get them to BCI accreditation. So around 25% of our farmers are BCI accredited. The message we want to take back to the farmers is that there is demand for BCI. The retailers are demanding it. The spinning mills are certainly asking for it in inquiries. So we just need to pass that message back to farmers and keep the BCI accreditation growing in Australia.
Yeah, that's certainly a message that we're bringing back to growers, yeah. So armed with the continuously improving cottonseed varieties, the research undertaken by CRDC and the resilience of farming practices, and let's be honest, the tenacity of the Australian cotton grower, the industry is expanding into new regions. We just want to show you a map of the existing regions and where new areas have opened up for cotton. Michael, can you tell us about what's happening in the new growing regions, please?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Well, I'm pleased to say that our industry is growing. It is not shrinking. The only time it shrinks is when we're having drought. But certainly the appetite for expansion is there. So if we look at the map of Australia there, the southern area, or down south, we've been referring to that for a number of years now as our new area, but in actual fact it's not that new. It's been around for some time now. That area alone can produce up to 1 million bales. There are 3 gins located, the newly built gins, to support that region. And when you spoke about varieties before, all varieties that are on offer, grown, be it down south or in our traditional areas, there's no change in quality attributes. So it's the length, strength, and micron air is as good as anywhere, and that does not change throughout the regions. But one of the newest areas is up and out the northern part of Australia, and we all 2 years ago travelled there as a group, and we're overwhelmed by the excitement from the growers that are growing there at the moment, but also from the potential growers that want to get into the cotton industry and are quite excited about having an industry up there. And there is a cotton gin that will be in production there next year, and we're also hearing reports of a cotton gin also being built in 2023. The one that's will be there in operation next year, it will be less than 300 kilometres from the Port of Darwin. And why I mention that is 300 or less than 300 kilometres is quite a short distance when you look at the other traditional areas where some of it can be a few thousand, 2,000 kilometres or hundreds of kilometres from their sort of Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane ports.
One of the other advantages, I suppose, Michael, is that it gives us more of an all-around crop production. So it's also on a different water availability system. So we're not just depending on the traditional river systems that we're using in the traditional areas, but we're expanding into where there is more water available and less pressure on that water consumption. So we could see, I suppose, more of a continual year-round supply in growing and also in shipping. Is that true?
That's certainly right, Emma. The northern part of Australia they have a different weather pattern to to us, I guess, down in this area, or the traditional areas as we're calling it. So the cotton is grown and picked at different times, or opposite times to what it is in our areas that we've spoken about. So yes, it could become a 12-month supply.
Yeah. One of the other things to note is that in those regions, traditionally they've been, cattle producers or small horticultural industries, but now with cotton going into those regions, it's really underpinning more agricultural development in broadacre, which will support other cropping systems. So we're actually being able to support rural communities as well, to bring more wealth into those areas. I'd like to return for a moment to the environmental credentials. In Australia, our regional communities really are the lifeblood of our industry. The majority of farms are family owned. They're passionate about their farming management, soil health, land stewardship, because they know they're passing it on to the next generation. Let's hear from Stuart and Tyson Armitage. They're a father and son team, and they have 3 generations of cotton farming in their family.
We concentrate on growing cotton because it's easiest and most rewarding crop that we can grow. Last year we did get some good rain in February, and we did 2 in-crop irrigations and averaged almost 13 bales a hectare. When you reflect back to the 90s when we were spraying 18 to 20 times in a season, and this year we haven't sprayed cotton yet, that's a big step forward for us and the industry and quality in the world. If we can deliver a product that's hasn't been sprayed, or sprayed minimal times, or once or twice. So we're doing trials this year on new cotton that has 6 genes in it, which will make life even easier.
It's been really interesting coming home on the farm. We've probably come at a really good time in the cotton industry. There's been a lot of innovation with Bollgard, and cotton is continually advancing in its technology. The seams of the better soil health we have, the better crops we grow. Like we could go out and not do anything to our soil and grow cotton and probably get reasonable yields, and it'd be all rosy. But with a better balance of nutrition, and we're using manures, little to no nitrogen applied pre or in crop in cotton. We're seeing a much better balance in our nutrition, which is great for future generations and for our soil, but it's also increasing our yield. Our integrated pest management program allows us to use a natural way of controlling the bad pests without using harsh chemicals or any chemicals. We've come a long way in our use of chemicals since the 90s, and we don't want to end up back where we were.
In the cotton industry in this area, it's probably front and centre. Our agronomist has over 40 clients or farms, and all but one of them has a son or sons and daughters coming home to take over the farm. So when you've got an industry that's attractive to young people, you've got a vibrant and dynamic industry, and that's what the cotton industry is in Australia.
A lovely father and son moments there. Cliff, in your view, how important is it that we keep a focus on the environmental management and our responsible production of cotton?
Well, I think that was a great illustration of what's going on in our industry. Certainly, as was mentioned at the start, I've been in the business a long time, and what I've noticed in the last few years is this generational change, and where I used to speak to the fathers about what they were doing with their marketing, now it's increasingly the sons that are getting actively involved, and it really is, and daughters, sorry. And I think, this is a great example of the way the industry is changing, the generational change, as the younger people come into the industry with new ideas, but also continuing what their parents have done, the stewardship of the land, responsible production of food and fibre. But it's exciting for the industry to see this generational change to see active involvement of young people and more people being prepared to come back to the farm after being away at university and whatever. It really is encouraging for the future and the sustainability of our industry.
Matt, what would you think brings young people to invest and come back into the cotton industry? What do you think it is that attracts them?
Well, just listening to Stuart there, he said the 40 farmers around him, all 40 had returning family members. So I think the young people are returning because they've got the family farming and they've learned the family farming practices, but they're also probably fairly interested in ag tech. They're more early adopters. They're more willing to go out there and have a look at new systems, auto robotics, ag tech systems. So I'd say that's, it's all new to the industry and things are changing.
I think the other thing with that is that there's much more of a focus today on the environmental aspects of what's going on, not just cotton. And younger people certainly are focusing a lot on that environmental area. So to be able to come back into an industry that has such a focus and to be able to contribute, I think that attracts a lot of the younger people that they can really do something about the environmental impacts.
And they're probably also much more adept at flying drones than their parents as well.
I can tell you that.
As we have all seen through COVID, we're depending on technology to help us manage our daily existence. Technology in agriculture space, it has had a huge impact on the farming sector. Australian cotton farms are huge, and we've heard from Rod Gordon, who manages 18,000 hectares. The most average farms, family farms, maybe 1,000 to 1,200 hectares on average size. But they're still very big areas to manage. There's been investment in robotics and, as Matt has said, and automated irrigation systems and automated vehicles. One of our very forward-thinking growers, Jamie Grant, who farms on the Darling Downs in southeast Queensland, recently talked to us about his plans for a swarm farm. And we're not talking bees here. Let's take a look.
Yeah, what we've got here is an autonomous vehicle. It's called a SwarmBot, made by a mob up at Emerald. We've got a weed selected sprayer on the back of it, and so that allows us just to keep spraying 24 hours a day. It's got its own weather station on it, so if the weather's not set to what we've set it, if it goes above or below what we've set it at, it just pulls up immediately, goes to sleep and starts up again when the weather's right. So we're also hoping down the track that microwave's going to become a reality to beat any resistant weeds and use less chemical and stuff. So we've got our second one coming very soon, and it'll be interesting to see in a few years' time, whether we've got rid of our big machines and replace them with a whole series of little fellas. We just never stop it. It just gets to one end of the farm and starts again. So the whole time it's spraying very small weeds, rather than us with the bigger machines going out and spraying big weeds. So it's actually the target is so much smaller, so you're using so much less chemical. And we can use lighter rates because we're not spraying big hard to kill weeds, we're spraying little vulnerable weeds. I think carbon's a big deal because it means higher organic matter in your soil, which means higher moisture retention. Without anything else, any of the other additives for the farmer, that's the big deal. I used to grow all grain. I gave it away 20 years ago because we were going nowhere. The grain varieties really still haven't changed a lot in yield, and not much has happened. But the cotton industry, thank goodness, got into genetics. Our yields have gone up. They've probably doubled in the last 10 years, and that's been able to dilute our direct costs, and that keeps us in the industry. That's what cotton's all about.
Very interesting to hear from Jamie and his passion for automated vehicles. Michael, what do you see as the main benefits for these automated vehicles, particularly around the responsible production of crops?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Well, firstly, I just love seeing these sorts of things, and I had the pleasure of meeting Jamie, and two things really stood out for me meeting Jamie, and that was one, his passion for the industry, but also his passion for the land, but the care of the land. And I guess it's something like we've just seen, that piece of technology then allows the land and the crop management to be at a much higher standard. Using less chemical is a great thing. And Jamie spoke about the microwave technology, which could mean getting rid of chemical spray on weeds. So, and these sorts of things, you don't have to have anyone physically on those machines, which then, it doesn't tie up, one or two people to maintain it or be there. They can then go and concentrate on other things that they've got to do, managing their crop, whilst the spray rig is doing its job automatically. It's great, and I think it also, and you touched on it about the forward thinking of the growers that we have here in Australia, and that certainly demonstrates that, which it's very proud to see.
And also to note that it's an Australian machine, so it's been produced locally in Australia as well. So we'll have to go back out to Jamie's farm when he has a number of them in his swarm farm and see how that gets managed. There is other technology in the form of traceability systems that's becoming more popular with the global textile market. Arthur, what are we doing as an industry to address the question of traceability?
Traceability has certainly become a hot topic, and I think it goes along with the sustainability piece, and also the social responsibility and the way things are grown. So the Australian cotton industry, we've always had a traceability solution from the point of view of our bale tags. So every bale has a unique bale identification. We've got the barcode on every bale. So that barcode goes with the bale basically until the cover's removed and the tag's removed and the bale goes in the laydown. So we've always had traceability to that point. In the last couple of years, we've gone to the next level where there are solutions in Australia, probably I think at the moment 3, where there are steps taken so that the cotton can be traced beyond that point, so it can actually be traced through to the garment, so that you can identify where that cotton was grown, even right through to the garment, and that's through systems where markers are applied at the gin, or through elemental analysis, those types of technologies. So it really is next level, and something that is in demand, otherwise people wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, true. And as you said, I mean, the traceability and the sustainability go hand in hand, because we can have the sustainability and we can have all of the measures that can prove that, but adding the traceability back to, to the actual region is just so, it's the perfect suite of information to give to the retailers and then on to the consumers, so they know where their product actually comes from. I know Cotton Australia has been working with Australian retailers to promote Australian cotton, and the program has had great success and been very well received by retailers and by consumers alike. And we hope that we can introduce more global retailers to the benefits of the most responsibly produced cotton on the planet. So thank you to our panel. We have come to the end of our information session. And I think you would agree that we have a very dynamic and continuously improving industry here in Australia. Just before we go to the question and answer session, we do have 2 polls that we would like you to participate in. The first one is related to your priority when deciding to buy Australian cotton. And apart from the price, what's the most important element to you? Is it the quality, the contamination-free, or the delivery time? Please choose one. And the second poll will help us to understand how important BMP or BCI is to your business. So it's yes, no, or sometimes. So please take a moment to complete the polls, and then we'll have a look at what those results look like. And in the meantime, we'll be checking our iPad for questions from the audience. Okay, let's see what we have. From Nishant Asher in India, of the 2.5 million bales, what percentage has been sold to end users? I think we should take an individual response to that. Michael, what do you think?
Well, maybe it's around 60-70% so far. Yeah.
Matt, what do you think?
I'm thinking the cotton grown sold from farmers to merchants is only around 60%, so I think it's a lot less than what Michael's believing. I think there's still a lot left to sell. That's a good price.
See the healthy competition at this table, Cliff?
I think it's impossible to tell because simply we're diversifying our markets, so we don't know where the cotton is being moving. You know, and look, over the last few years, I think it's probably been easier to come to some sort of consensus on that because of our reliance on one market.
Yeah,
now we're all competing in a range of markets, and therefore, you know, you've got this dispersed marketing activity, and it makes it harder.
Okay, so Arthur, do you have any insight?
Obviously, our land's well sold. So I tend to agree with Matt. I think farmers are sitting back a little bit at the moment because they're a bit unsure of their yields. So they're sort of sitting on a bit of cotton. And
but they're very good, Arthur.
They are very good. They're very good. But yeah, so there is some more to come to market. But I would suspect in the vicinity of 50% of the crop is already sold to the end user, something like that.
Okay, so there's plenty available. So to the audience, sharpen your pencils. We have a question regarding transit times. What is the latest on transit times to Bangladesh, as this seems to be the biggest impediment to sales of Australian cotton to the market? I'd actually say price would be the single biggest impediment prior to the congestion up to this point. But what do you think, Cliff? What's your comment on that?
I think that probably is our biggest challenge this year as a market. Because of the congestion, not only at the port in Bangladesh, but also with the feeder vessels. But as Arthur sort of touched on before, hopefully, as we get into the second half of this year, that situation will improve. No doubt it currently is an issue.
Can I ask a question on that to the panel myself? I'm not sure that Australia, per se, would face any worse a situation in terms of getting cotton into Bangladesh than any other origin.
No. That's a generic problem.
Yeah, so
it's a generic problem.
I guess to that point, I'm not sure that it can be said that it's the biggest impediment to Australian cotton getting into Bangladesh, apart from cotton potentially from India maybe that can go by land. I think every exporting country has that challenge, and not only to Bangladesh. So yeah, just to reiterate that.
Problems with their exports.
Similar.
For the same reason.
Yeah.
There's a question for Cliff from Rehan Nasir. Your comments regarding diversification, do you mean other crops or price diversification, i.e. a lower priced grade for countries like Pakistan?
Well, first of all, I'd say, Rehan, you really need to listen a lot closer. We're talking about the diversification of our markets for cotton. Australian cotton, and you know, Pakistan really should be a bigger buyer of Australian cotton, and you just got to find the right agent to help stimulate that business.
Thank you, Cliff. We also have a question regarding price, and it's the price difference between Australia and US and Australia and Brazil. And I think, Matt, you made some comments about that earlier. Would you like to just restate where we're looking at on the premiums?
Yeah, so historically Australian can trade anywhere from 2 to 8 cents premium to the US. I'd say at the moment it's trading at par or maybe between 50 points under or 50 points over. And for Brazilian, it can trade sort of up to 8 to 12 cents over at times, and especially when our China's in the market and basis is very firm. They take it at a premium. What we're seeing is the Brazilian basis has rallied actually, so it's probably sitting more around 3-4 cents at the moment, and I believe against West African we're about 5.5 cents above them, which is quite competitive as well.
Okay.
I think it's a huge difference. You know, we haven't been competitive in recent years, but for sure we are competitive for the 21 crop and 22 crops. And those other growths haven't faced competition from Australia for a long time. Now they're going to get it.
Yep, that's fair to say, Cliff. A question from China: what direction do you see the basis for Australian cotton moving forward? So I suppose, given bigger crops and our...
Where did the question come from?
The question came from China. So what's our view of, I suppose, the forward basis for 22 and...
I think basis is tied to the other growths, so US and Brazil. It's all going to be tied to whether China's in the market or is not in the market, and how well we diversify. It'll be tied to our quality and what we get for 21 and 22 crops and where we sell it. I think at the moment, with good yields, what we've got, and the fact that we are looking to get competitive with the US and diversify basis, will probably stay fairly consistent. And when I say consistent, as in it'll trade consistently around the US values, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower.
Yeah, that's fair to say, and hopefully we get the large crops to facilitate that. We have some comments or questions regarding quality. Is Australia thinking of growing Pima again? Arthur.
I'll answer that if you like. At the moment, I would suggest not. While the Pima price has now gone up to very heady levels, up close to 2 cents a pound, we basically don't have the infrastructure here anymore. We did have 2 roller gins a long time ago, and out in sort of far western New South Wales at Tandau there was a roller gin there, but there's no longer any cotton. There are other challenges associated with growing Pima. I'd be really surprised to see Pima cotton or extra long staple grown. I think what we will see is that we'll push more into these longer staple upland growths where more and more 40 staple and those sorts of characteristics. But I'm not sure that we'll be headed towards ELS. It's just got some other challenges that we're probably not going to...
Yield's a
huge,
big part of that.
Yeah.
Again, on a quality question, do we think that we will grow organic cotton in Australia? I think that comes back to the yield issue as well, and to the
yield and cost.
And I guess if you reflect on the focus for the innovation and the research that we're doing, we're really looking at continuing to improve the upland varieties that we're growing to meet all forms of the market demand that we have. So I don't think we'll see organic cotton in the near future, or if at all. Another quality related question, do you provide bale by bale HVI data results like Brazil?
100%.
Yeah, and I believe we have every merchant in Australia provides that, and have done for many years. I've been in the industry not as long as Cliff, but I've been in the industry for bit over 20 years, and we've always, the industry, as far as I know, has always supplied 100% HVI data.
I'm not sure where this question comes from, but obviously somebody has some loose change and they want to come and invest in ginning in Australia. Can anybody build a gin in Australia?
Yeah, it's a free market. Technically? Yeah, technically, yep.
Yeah, okay, there's that. US sell a lot of cotton by recap. Can Australia also sell recaps?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yep. That's up to the individual merchants.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
I'll probably add there that our cotton's more streamlined and consistent versus with the US. They're selling a wide range of recaps, and similar to in Brazil. So you would see less recaps coming from Australia, and probably more descriptive style sales as we get to know the quality.
So that's typically the recaps come at the end of the season when we've got some, lack of consistency around the quality, and that's when the recaps get offered typically.
Yeah.
Yeah. A question from Turkey. The Australian basis is high in the Turkish market, probably due to the freight rate. Is there anything the industry can do to fix this?
It certainly is due to the freight rate. No doubting that. And I think that's what we need to rely on, is just try and get some of this global congestion down, and maybe wait a little bit until June, July and see what happens. But Turkish freight rate is high.
Yeah, I think freight rates around the world are extremely high at the moment, and shipping lines will tell you they are unashamedly making profits for the first time in a long time. I think that climate is what we're all going to have to deal with going forward for quite a few years yet. Let's see. Here's a question on soil. How are we maintaining good soil? Interesting one. Does anybody want to recap on some of the grower comments?
I think the important thing there, or there's a few, but rotation, so not growing the same crop over and over again. So putting our organic matter back into the soil, which I think Stuart Armitage mentioned. Also permanent wheel tracks. So one of the worst things you can do to your soil is compaction, and so essentially compacting the soil by driving heavy machinery over the land. Something that we do here in Australia, basically all farmers do these days, is all their tractors, their pickers, all their machinery basically that drives on the farm is controlled by satellite. So it's actually steered with satellite navigation. And what that enables the farmer to do is every time that any machinery drives on the land, those wheels drive on exactly the same tracks. So what that means is you have just narrow tracks which are compacted, and only a very small percentage of the field is compacted in those wheel tracks. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are done. The soil health is of utmost importance, and that's it's one of the ways we get our high yields. We wouldn't be able to get these yields if we were growing back-to-back cotton time and time again. So rotation and all these other management tools are very important. Question related to, so obviously somebody who may have joined this seminar late, have floods in Australia affected quality? I think we've already stated that we may have had a slight impact to the yield, but a really negligible impact to the quality of this year's crop, and there's been very little of the crop at the picking stage when the rains did hit. So some slight yield losses, but overall not a major quality downgrade. What's our competitive advantage over US cotton, again, for Pakistan?
Lack of contamination. We've got the least contamination of all growths, so that's a big selling point. I think the even running nature of our cotton is also a big selling point, and comes back to what Matt said about recaps. I mean, if you see a US recap, that recap will range from 11s down to 51s. We don't have that range. So in a typical year, grade-wise is going to be in a very narrow range, predominantly 21s, strict middlings. So I think that's the real big attraction, is no contamination and even running cotton.
Transit time.
Yeah. I think then there's also a similar question from Turkey about, can you guarantee white cotton? And I suppose that would refer to this, well, let's say it's for this current crop because it's not specific, but again, the quality has not been detrimentally affected by recent rain, so I think we can say...
Even in some of the poorer seasons we've had, we don't have spotted or light spotted cottons. It is a white grade.
So yes to that. Pakistan. Could we do a US-style summit there? In Australia. Well, I suppose we'll have to think about that. Panellists?
The cotton conference.
Potentially the cotton conference.
Good point.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say stay tuned to the AXA website to find out more news about the next conference that we're going to run in Australia next year, and certainly all are welcome. Is farming in Australia subsidised by the government? Again, we've got a couple of questions on that, 3 questions in fact.
I thought I made that pretty clear in the presentation that there is no government subsidy of the Australian cotton industry. In fact, we're probably the only industry globally that receives no government support in terms of grower payments to convince them to grow a crop. The only way that we compete is through yield and through quality. And the government has always, from the outset, made it very clear that they don't want to have the financial involvement in the Australian cotton industry, that we have to survive on our own means, and we do. And it comes back to everything that we've discussed in the seminar about our yields and our quality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. One other question there is Australian cotton 100% traceable? Again, I think we have addressed that. We can say that yes, it is through various methods, and I suppose also watch this space, because I think soon we will have some more information about traceability technology for Australian cotton. So as soon as we do have any good or new information on that, we will let everybody know. Just to the panelists, is there anything that that you wanted to mention that we haven't already covered here?
I think maybe we should just comment on the classification system in Australia.
How do we class Australian cotton?
Michael?
Yeah, so the Australian crop is classed, so colour and leaf is done visually by USDA standards and the guide boxes that support that. Length, strength, micron air and other attributes are done on HVI. All HVI in Australia are the HVI 1000s. They're very reliable and we're very happy with them. So that's about it as far as the process is concerned for classing here in Australia.
There's a question related to a yarn count, and what yarn count range can be spun with Australian cotton?
I think a good point here was in terms of price. If you're spinning 30 and 40 count yarns, then you really should be looking at Australian. But we certainly do have the length and strength to spin 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. So if you're integrated mill and you're looking to spin a finer count, then we can certainly supply that.
Okay, thanks for that, Matt. Will Australian suppliers be prepared to make attractive offers for fourth quarter and later shipments to compete with US and Brazil? Don't mention the inverse. Cliff, you can take this.
I think the answer is yes, we will. Clearly, with everything we've spoken about, the diversification in markets, increased production, we will be in the market for fourth quarter and potentially first quarter of next year. We have to be competitive, and again, to reiterate what I mentioned before, we have no government support for our industry, so it's imperative that we move cotton to the market quickly, efficiently, and we have to be competitive to do that.
That's true. Just making sure we cover most of those questions. One of the questions that we've received is, what are you doing to change the perception that cotton is bad for the environment?
I'll take that one. There's a lot of work has been done, and Cotton Australia has certainly led the charge on that. By way of social media platforms, but also holding open house. Last year they held an open house Cotton Day, inviting people in the community made up of journalists, people who weren't necessarily associated with the industry, and also with industry people, and it was there was panels that was set up, discussed what was happening, but also took took questions from the general public, basically, that attended, and that's something that I think that will continue going forward to I guess address any concerns that people have. But rest assured, there's been plenty of work that's going into that space, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, we go back to our social license to operate, I think. Right. Yeah. I think I misread a previous question. The summit, it was in Pakistan, not Australia. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. As soon as COVID lifts, we're happy to come. I love Pakistani food, actually. It's a great place to go.
We'll be the first on the plane as soon as we can, out of our gilded cage. We had another question relating to quality. Will Australia be growing any short staple, 35 staple or shorter this season?
Well, that's. I don't think there will be a lot of short staple around this year. That's just my opinion. Short staple comes when the crops haven't had enough water, or they're stressed in some form. So far, the crops have received good water, as far as I know it. So I'm not expecting an abundance of short staple. Australia doesn't, even in drought times, we don't really produce a lot of short staple because the growers, they will use what water they have and put it on and use it wisely for the crop they're growing. In actual fact, in some of the drought years is probably can be our best quality years because of that intense, I guess, focus from the grower on that crop, getting it through. So.
Yeah, true. Thanks for that, Michael. We just got the results of the poll, and the priorities after price: quality 75%, contamination-free 40%, delivery time 13%. And as far as MyBMP or BCI is concerned, is it very important to your business? A resounding 96% said yes. That's very positive. Such great questions and very interesting discussion. As our time comes to a close, I'd like to thank the panel for their participation and to the audience for spending the time with us today. We hope that you learned something you didn't already know about Australian cotton. We're very proud of the continuous improvement in our industry. And just before we finish, we are very fortunate to be able to meet here today, to be together, to have less of a lockdown. We're very conscious that countries like India are going back into more strict lockdowns, and we wish you all very well with the vaccine rollout, and hopefully those lockdowns be lifted and you get back to some sort of normality soon. In summary, our message is clear. We're producing high quality, high yielding fibre that's produced in a very competitive market. We're priced very competitively, and we produced in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way. Until we meet again, please stay safe and well and continue to buy Australian cotton. We produce the best, and you deserve the best. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today and listening to our story. I look forward to giving you regular crop updates. Stay safe, and we hope to see you soon.